Afade, welcome everyone to the Guam Congress building. The Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture is now called to order. Today is Tuesday, May 2nd. The time is 5:02 p.m. Before I even go any further, can I just say I thank you so much for waiting for that previous hearing. I of course, underestimated the time for both of the hearings today, so my deepest apologies to all of you and my sincere thanks for being here. In compliance with the open government law, notices for this oversight hearing were published in the Guam Daily Post and the Government of Guam Public Notice Portal on Tuesday, April 25 and Friday, April 28, 2023. This hearing is being live streamed on the Guam Legislature's YouTube channel. Notices were also sent by email to all senators and main media broadcasting outlets on the same days. This is an oversight hearing. We've invited certain people we'd like to hear testify. After that, we will see anyone else who wishes to testify. And of course, I'm going to ask my colleagues on our panel up here to ask questions and comments as well after all the testimony. Please, just one rule, please state your name for the record. So we're transcribing these proceedings and it would help us very much. I'd like to thank my colleagues for attending today, beginning with my Vice Chair, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Terlaje, and Senator Jesse Lujan. All right, I'd like to acknowledge all of you dignitaries here today, but I'm going to let you introduce yourselves so we can just save some time and I'll move on. All right, so the oversight hearing today, the topic is social worker pay, retention and recruitment, and the status of the Guam Board of Social Work rules and regulations to strengthen child and family safety, stability, and protections from abuse and exploitation. That's the goal, right? And so in our previous hearings, we had discussions, and it seemed to me that a shortage of social workers is really contributing to some of the issues that we are facing. That's maybe an understatement. So today's oversight hearing is called to continue that discussion on the critical need to strengthen child and family safety, stability, and protections from abuse and exploitations. We had another oversight hearing on April 18 with the Department of Public Health and Social Services to discuss improvements to foster parent eligibility and background check requirements and to receive updates on the current number of foster care providers and foster care licenses pending. The hearing was held following the tragic news of the case of a child in the foster care system that was allegedly sexually assaulted by a foster parent, had been charged twice before on allegations of molestation of children known to him just 5 months prior to the current case, and in 2018, and to discuss with the committee and inform the community of its current efforts to fill those procedural gaps to better protect foster children from abuse by sexual predators. We were informed by the Department of Public Health and Social Services of the steps taken to expand the vetting process beyond current required criminal history background checks, which included working with the Guam Police Department, the Attorney General's Office, and the Judiciary to obtain a history of arrest record as part of the expanded process, and to address limited access of CPS to the FBI National Crime Information Center system. Access is only provided to child protection agencies for investigating or responding to reports of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and not for background checks. That's pursuant to federal law. So Public Health had recently updated the committee on the progress with implementing new safeguards. So in addition to police clearances and virtual computerized criminal histories, the Guam Police Department will conduct the additional background queries available to GPD, including Criminal Investigations Division investigations. They're going to make this information available to the Department of Public Health, or CPS. The Domestic Abuse Response Team investigations. The Law Enforcement Records Management System, or LERMS. The Federal Bureau of Investigation fingerprint reports. Unfortunately, GPD is limited by law with providing expunged records and FBI NCIC background information outside of authorized purposes. GPD noted that these limitations are being discussed and their impact on providing thorough background checks are being addressed. In addition, and that's information we just received today. In addition to the court clearances provided by the Judiciary of Guam, CPS will be able to send requests electronically and processing time will be expedited. Clearances will also include criminal cases where the defendant is on pretrial status, probation, or has been convicted. Dismissed cases will also be included. This is a huge change, so thank you for your work on this. Additionally, the judiciary is looking into the background fingerprint checks through NCIC system and is to let CPS know what is required to begin that process. This is for information needed for foster parents, including members of the household of the foster parent. So CPS has assured us they're now running this type of background checks on all the members, adult members of the households. Following the first oversight hearing, we received communications from foster parents commending the actions of CPS to increase vetting procedures, but also raising concern about the understaffing of child protective social workers. According to these foster parents, they were informed during a foster parent forum that each social worker can be responsible for between 75 and 95 children. They stated that they believe this has contributed to their experiences with irregular home visits and follow-ups of caseworkers. Some foster parents shared that they have had little to no communication with caseworkers. And according to BOSA's foster care unit standard operating procedures, caseworkers are responsible for conducting quarterly monitoring of all certified family foster homes to evaluate compliance with Guam standards. So not too long after the first hearing and the concerns brought to my office, we were again horrified to learn in the news of another case of sexual abuse of a foster child who had been abused since she was in the 5th grade. This time, the alleged abuse was done by a boyfriend of the foster parent. This again brings to light the larger gap in the safeguards of foster children and all children in our community, and that is the impact of the ongoing just changes in our society, plus our admitted deficit of child protective social workers in the community. By deficit, I mean the lack of, not enough. We need more. As well, and this is not just specific to Guam, but nationwide. So we recognize this. This is nothing, We have known of the challenge with gaining and maintaining the sufficient number of child protective social workers in our community. In 2020, a backlog of thousands of referrals, including 57 that included allegations serious enough to warrant CPS crisis intervention, led to the governor declaring a state of emergency regarding the operational state of CPS in January 2021, and designating the Department of Youth Affairs as the administrative custodian of CPS on a temporary basis, assigning DYA oversight over CPS operations. In June of last year, it was reported that DYA was slowly transitioned out of administrative custody of transitioned administrative custody of CPS back to Department of Public Health and Social Services, having tackled thousands of referrals and onboarding at least 16 social workers, 13 community program aides, 3 additional homemakers, and 3 administrative support staff, but also lost about 9 social workers at that time. In October of 2021, through Executive Order 2021-26, the governor established the Division of Children's Wellness to manage millions of dollars in federal grant funds earmarked to improve, protect, and sustain child care programs in Guam. The Bureau of Social Services and all its components were transitioned to this division. Additionally, the executive order allocated $250,000 to be utilized to address the continuing emergency at CPS and directed the Department of Administration to develop a differential and premium pay incentive pay policy for employees of DYA and the Department of Public Health and Social Services, whose primary focus is child welfare services, which included overtime, hazardous, and night differential pay. However, from the feedback that this committee has received, recruitment and retention still remain a challenge. Furthermore, it seems that more and more we are hearing of horrifying cases of child abuse, sexual assault, and neglect in the news. And while it may be the outcome of more victims, family members, and others reporting abuse, it still is very alarming, especially knowing that there's an ongoing shortage of social workers and other professionals to help monitor and protect these placements and our children, to help them through the aftermath of the trauma and the abuse, and to prevent them from experiencing any further trauma and abuse. So this second oversight hearing will focus on social workers and our need for them, with a discussion on the status of the social worker pay, and the emergency measures and direction by the governor to look at incentive pay policies, including overtime, hazardous, and night differential pay, and other recruitment and retention efforts, but also to hear any recommendations of how we can address the procedural gaps with home visits, inspections, and follow-ups to ensure that children in care of the system are thoroughly protected from harm. We've also, in addition to public health, invited the Guam Board of Social Workers to provide a status update on their rules and regulations as well as any recommendations in regards to recruitment and retention of social workers. And we've also, of course, invited the National Social Workers Alliance and the University of Guam, the School of Health, the Social Work Program for their input, and the NASW, National Association of Social Workers, Guam chapter, right? All right. So we're going to begin with public health, and I understand public health has a PowerPoint, so if that's ready to go, our director, I will recognize you, Director Arts and Augustine, and please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon, Speaker Terlaje, members of the 37th Guam Legislature, Senator Joe San Augustine, Senator Lujan, Senator Brown, Senator Taitigui. This afternoon with me, I have Deputy Director Terlaje, and along with me, I also have the Acting Chief for the Human Services Administrator for the Division of Children's Wellness, Patricia Mofnis, and also with me is our Social Service Supervisor, too, for the Bureau of Social Services Administration, referred to as BOSA, under the Division of Children's Wellness. They will all be with me today, and we're here to discuss the matter before us. So these are my opening remarks. Buenas Speaker and members of the 37th Guam Legislature. Today, my team and I are here to provide where we are with social worker pay, recruitment, and retention, our staffing, and how we can strengthen child and family safety, stability, and protection. Since March, we have engaged the Guam Police Department and Judiciary of Guam to conduct additional background checks for the Bureau of Social Services Administration, Division of Children's Wellness. Today, my team will present the update from these two partners. DPHSS to the Division of Children's Wellness, Bureau of Social Services Administration, BOSA, is comprised of intake crisis, investigation, case management, family support services, and home evaluation and placement section, work to protect our children and promote family reunification when determined to be appropriate and suitable. Our social workers and the entire BOSA team work to protect, safeguard, and advocate for our children. They are committed to being an advocate for victims of child abuse and neglect. DCW BOSA will continue to review its processes to identify opportunities to improve its operations, to strengthen its procedures that result in greater accountability, maintain communications with federal partners for technical assistance and guidance in various aspects of child abuse and neglect, and conduct discussions to solicit input from staff and stakeholders on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in the operations of the Bureau of Social Services Administration. From our April 18, 2023 oversight hearing, we stated we were working with GPD and the Judiciary of Guam to form commitments from both entities in regards to each expanding their background checks on behalf of BOSA, on behalf of the children under our custody. Today, Acting Chief Mofnis will provide an update on our engagement with GPD and Judiciary. The same updates were provided through a letter transmitted to Speaker Terlaje on April 28, 2023. I must respectfully remind everyone, DPHSS cannot discuss any details regarding recent incidents due to ongoing investigations. It's important to protect the integrity of investigations. However, please know that we are all taking all necessary steps to address the situation and ensure the safety and well-being of all involved. And at this time, I'd like to ask Acting Chief Mofnis to please start with our PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So today we'll be discussing the social worker pay, recruitment and retention staffing, and how we will strengthen child and family safety, stability, and protection. Next slide. For social worker pay, the 25% differential pay is paid timely. There is no social worker pending this payment. They are also availing of night differential pay, which is also paid timely. They avail of the 10% hazardous pay based on contact, and it was last paid in November 22nd, but the back-end pay will start from December 22nd to present. An account has been identified and back-end pay data input is ongoing, and we anticipate a payout in at least 3 weeks. And that amount for hazardous pay due to the staff is $45,306. In terms of overtime, overtime was last paid in January 2023. A back-end pay will start in February 2023 to present, and the overtime pay had to be updated and changed, but it also now reflects the 22% increase. So the OT plan was certified and routed to the governor's office, and we anticipate payout again in 3 weeks. For the 22% increase for the general pay plan, we reflected at 15 pay periods, and all BOSA staff reflect the 22% increase in the DOA system. It is up to date, but we do have 2 social workers that are pending a retroactive pay of that 22%. They weren't paid that recently, but it'll be backdated to April 1st. So we are aware of that and making sure we act on it. Next slide, please. Our plans to address recruitment and retention include, and these are ideas that we're throwing around with our staff, and we hope to implement, is a signing bonus for a 3-year commitment if a social worker will decide to work at BOSA. We are also working with UOG. So UOG Bachelor of Social Work graduates will be offered a Social Worker 2 position after successful completion of the on-site BSW practicum at BOSA. Also, the 22% general pay plan is what's helping with retention and recruitment efforts. We will continue the 25% incentive pay, the 10% hazardous pay based on exposure, and we would like to offer an incentive for training certifications and for social work licensing. Next slide is plans to address recruitment and retention. So in terms of retention, we currently have promoted in-house 3 social workers to social worker 3 classified positions. We want to also incentivize satisfactory performance for staff. We are promoting a work-life balance by partnering with Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center for counseling services for our staff, for like trauma debriefing. We want to include a self-day care for our staff so that they can, unwind a little and to prevent burnout, right, because of the things they see daily. We offer also work schedule flexibility, and we would like to re-implement the worksite wellness program. To help with and to prevent also burnout, we would like to do an outsourcing of some services such as our outreach, education, and prevention. Next slide. I would like to share with you our current staffing at BOSA. For our intake crisis unit, we have 4 social workers, which includes a social worker 3, 2 social worker 2s, and a social worker 1. Investigations, we do have a total of 7 staff, and 1 is currently detailed there from the Division of Public Welfare, HICFA section, which is under public health. We also have case management, which have 11 staff. We have the home evaluation and placement section, which has 2 staff, 2 social worker 3s. Our family support services includes 24 staff, which includes a supervisor, a social worker 3, a SW1, 7 homemakers, and then 14 staff that assist at our Guam and Aussie shelter. And then our admin staff is a total of 12 staff that help with our daily requirements for procurement and foster care maintenance payments and contracts. So we have a total of 60 staff to date. Next slide. For pending applications, we have currently 2 open positions for social worker 3s. Recently, we had interviews where we had a listing of 10 applicants from DOA, but of the 10, 6 declined interviews. Of the 4 we interviewed, we selected them, and of the 2 open positions, we're still pending a supplemental listing from DOA, but we have received word that the listing has been exhausted. We have 7 open positions for social worker 2s, which are classified positions, and they're currently being recruited. And we also have 4 social worker 1 positions that are classified that we are recruiting.
Can you please do the next slide? So here are some of the interventions we have, which is implementing a safe word, age appropriate, between the social worker and their own children that are under their cases.
Can I just state for the record, so this is Crystal
I'm so sorry.
Godin.
My name is Crystal Gooden.
Yeah, good.
I'm the social services supervisor too.
Thank you.
We will be ensuring monthly visits with foster children in home settings, schools, daycares, and office settings. Ensure all foster children have access to contact their assigned social worker through their business cards, email addresses, WhatsApp, based on age appropriateness. Lonnie K. curriculum presentation to our foster children. Conduct mandated reporting presentations at private and public schools, implement a change report due within 10 days of a household change. Next slide, please. To strengthen child and family safety, social workers in the investigation unit are responsible for investigating child abuse and neglect referrals received by the Bureau to determine a finding for alleged maltreatment. Based on the investigation and assessment, social workers determine the intervention needed to protect the child. In cases in which it is determined that abuse or neglect exists, social workers then determine the services or intervention that is needed to mitigate risks and promote a safe and stable home environment. This is done through a written service plan agreement for our formal and informal cases, outlining the services that parents must engage to ensure the child's safety while still remaining in the home, or if the child is removed, the goal of services is to prepare the parents and child for reunification. Next slide, please. Depending on the risk factors, parents are often referred to parenting classes, drug and alcohol treatment, anger management, counseling, and any other necessary services to strengthen the family unit, promote safety of the family, and prevent further abuse or neglect. So below, we've listed some of the service providers that our parents and children have access to, which is Manetlu, Guam Behavioral Health, Salvation Army, private providers for counseling services. Next slide, please. The Intake and Crisis Unit is responsible for being the initial contact to gather and process reports of suspected child abuse and neglect. Intake workers screen reports and make assessments to determine the criteria for CPS involvement while determining appropriate response time. Additionally, Intake assists in connecting reporting parties to community services as necessary. Intake also initiates documentation and computer data entry. Referrals are routed to the supervisor for review, and activation of the crisis response team are routed directly to investigations, case management, or the family services section. Crisis workers are the first responders to address concerns for children's welfare when acute abuse or maltreatment has occurred, or if a child fears to return home. Crisis response and assesses emergent cases, assesses familial environment for safety, and if needed, exerts protective custody of all children who are in immediate danger. Crisis also mediates situations, develops safety plans, and connects families to services as needed. Next slide, please.
So just to give an update on our background checks from our last oversight hearing on April 18th, we do appreciate the partnerships we have with the Guam Police Department and the judiciary. They worked quickly in providing us some assistance. So the Guam Police Department will continue to provide clearances and queries using the following: the Guam Police Clearance, virtualized computerized criminal history, and in addition, GPD will conduct additional background queries with the Criminal Investigations Division, or SID investigations, Domestic Abuse Response Team, DART investigations, Law Enforcement Records Management System, which is called LERMS, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI fingerprint. Next slide. The judiciary has also offered their assistance, and they will be providing us clearances electronically, which will include criminal cases where the defendant is on pretrial status, on probation, if there are any convictions, or if there are any dismissed cases. And that will conclude our PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Director, does that conclude?
With regards to the discussion, Speaker, at this time it does.
Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And thank you for the presentation. Can I just clarify one thing, is that the home evaluation and placement, there are two of them under your current staffing pattern. But you didn't talk about that in the discussion. Can you just talk about that? What do they do that's different than what the crisis workers assess familial environment for safety when, I guess, when there's been allegations or there are concerns? But the home, that other position, the home evaluation?
Yes, Speaker. So the home evaluation placement is where our licensing unit is under. They're the ones that actually meet with potential individuals who are interested in becoming licensed foster parents. They go through the application, ensure that they have all the background checks done. They go out and do the home assessment. They meet and interview these individuals. Then they also route the information to myself, the acting chief, to certify their license.
Okay.
It is also the adoption custody. So these are the social workers that do adoption custody studies with the other courts. So they go out and interview and then provide reports to the court.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, then I'm going to hear from the Social Work Licensing Board.
Good afternoon. My name is Angelina Lepay. I'm the current chairperson of the Guam Board of Social Work. And I was invited here today to provide a status on the board's rules and regulations. The Guam Board of Social Work continues to work diligently on its rules and regulations. At the time of my reappointment to the board, as we had discussed at that time, we did have a subcommittee focused on that task, which included myself, Pete Meta, and Maureen St. During that time, it was during the pandemic, so we had virtual work sessions every weekend. We completed the draft in February 2022, and then forwarded that draft to the assigned Attorney General, Rob Weinberg, as well as the Association of Social Work Boards for their review and feedback. We received those, and then shortly after we received their feedback, we had the two subcommittee members resigned from the board. And since that time, the remaining members, Ms. Diana Calvo, who's with me here, and Jesse Boleto, continue to join me now to go over those recommendations and review everything. So at this time, we have scheduled weekly work sessions. We've moved to in-person because, you know, we're out of the pandemic and we're wanting to connect to ensure that we have this focus. Our goal is to complete that second draft within the next few months. You know, I'm estimating that with our weekly work sessions and the amount of work we've done so far, that we can complete that within the next 3 months. So based on that, what I've been told by HPLO is that from that point on, it would be forwarded to Department of Public Health and Social Services to hold a hearing and receive feedback from the stakeholders. And then once that was done, any comments from the public would be considered by the board as to whether or not we would like to incorporate that into the rules and regulations. From that point, it would be submitted to the governor and the Attorney General's office and then from that point submitted to you guys for your review and consideration. I think that we've got a lot of really great feedback from the Association of Social Work Boards, which is working with other licensing boards across the United States and Canada. Based on their Model Social Work Act, they've given us a lot of great feedback and resources. So that's really our discussions right now, is incorporating some of those things to make sure that our rules and regulations are as strong as they can be with this added input from these experts.
Is there anything in your new rules and regs that might impact recruitment and retention of social workers on Guam?
Well, not specifically, but I do think that when we look at levels of licensure, that as we talk about recruitment, retention, and pay, that some kind of consideration towards compensation for the different levels of licensure within the government would be warranted. So for example, I work for DOE, and within the Department of Education, when teachers reach the next level of education, they become reclassified. And then there's this pay incentive for doing that. So with a licensed social worker, what is to incentivize them to go for the next level of licensure, right? Renewing their licensure, the continuing education, that is just to maintain their job. But if we wanted to kind of promote and encourage them to move forward, I think that it's something that should be considered. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and thank you for being here as well, and to all you're only down to 3 board members now, and so you're doing all the work, the 3 of you. Masi.
We are. Thank you.
And I know you've been really diligent about that, working on the rules and regs. Okay, so we'll get back to the questions later. I'm going to continue with the testimony by the National Association of Social Workers, Guam chapter. I know we've got the chairperson here, Mr. Melasantos, and we've got Ovita Perez, who is the executive director.
Hafa Day, thank you for having us. My name is Jamela Santos. I'm the current president-elect of the Guam chapter of NASW, and I have Ms. Ovita Perez, who is our chapter manager. So what we did was we just prepared a statement that basically lists some points to touch on social worker pay, recruitment, and retention. And I basically just wrote it as some bullet points of information, so we can definitely expand on any of the issues if needed. So just to start with, the Guam chapter of the National Association of Social Workers is a member-based professional organization. So basically, people who want to join NASW, it's voluntary. Nobody's obligated to join NASW if they're social workers. Okay. So the Guam chapter of the National Association of Social Workers would like to offer the following information and input with regard to social worker pay, retention, and recruitment. Regarding social worker pay, nationally, the median annual salaries of master's level social workers are generally lower than that of similar professions, such as psychologists, social and community service managers, and school counselors with master's degrees. Prior to the passage of Bill 24-37, which implemented the adjusted general pay plan, thus increasing government of Guam employees' salaries by 22%, social worker salaries were, on average, nearly 20% lower than social workers in the US. Licensed social workers with advanced degrees, MSWs or PhDs or doctorates in social work, receive higher wages and salaries than those with BSW, Bachelor of Social Work degrees, when employed in social work positions. Currently, the Guam chapter NASW has 73 active members, last we checked. 35 of them are licensed. Approximately 10 of them are LCSW, which is Licensed Clinical Social Worker. 7 are LMSW, Licensed Master Social Worker. 18 are licensed Bachelor Social Workers. And roughly 3 of those LCSW licenses were obtained from an outside off-island board. Social workers have expressed concerns regarding delays in obtaining a fully recognized license through the Guam Board of Social Work. LCSW eligible social workers in particular may be limited in applying for jobs, in some cases higher paying jobs, that require licensure through a board regulated by the ASWB, referenced a moment ago by Ms. LePay. Many social workers end up seeking employment elsewhere. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Many social workers will seek licensure off-island or will opt instead to apply for other non-social work licenses offered by the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, such as licensed professional counselor or licensed mental health counselor. So with regard to social worker retention, locally and nationally, we see the growing needs of our population across the spectrum, from older adults to young children, and we see increased social challenges such as poverty and homelessness, mental health, chronic diseases, substance use, suicide, and a host of others. Difficult working conditions brought on by high caseloads, safety concerns, high rates of burnout, and insufficient salaries pose as barriers to recruitment and retention of social workers. Social workers are highly susceptible to something called compassion fatigue, which is characterized by physical and emotional distress that impacts the ability to deal with one's daily environment. Secondary traumatic stress, also referred to as vicarious trauma, is stress that results from indirect exposure to trauma, such as working with traumatized patients or clients. Untreated compassion fatigue can negatively impact work satisfaction and quality of care. It can exacerbate into more serious conditions such as PTSD, anxiety, or depression. Several notable symptoms of compassion fatigue are the impaired ability to care for clients, reduced ability to feel sympathy or empathy, and impaired judgment and behavior, or apathy and isolation, just to name a few. In 2019, the Social Work Reinvestment Initiative was launched by the policy arm of the NASW, our national chapter or our national group. The initiative's goal was to enhance societal well-being by securing federal and state investments to support recruitment, retention, and recognition, and adequate reimbursement of professional social workers. Although the proposed bill did not pass and was considered dead in Congress as of December 30th of 2020, the need to address these issues facing the social work profession remain locally and throughout the nation. Now, moving on to social worker recruitment. The University of Guam Division of Social Work graduates roughly 20 plus bachelor's level social workers each year. Through a partnership between UOG and the University of Hawaii at Manoa Thompson School of Social Work and Public Health, Guam residents with BSW degrees are eligible to earn an MSW without having to leave the island. They have a distance ed program. The number of social work graduates with advanced degrees is steadily increasing as a result of this partnership. At this time, we want to say there's no shortage of social workers who are graduating with their BSW or MSW degrees. The barriers that many new graduates express is that the hiring process, particularly with the Department of Administration, is incredibly lengthy. A number of graduates have reported waiting times as long as 12 months from the time they submit their applications to the time they receive notice of being rated or eligible for an interview. Many social workers end up seeking employment elsewhere, either in nonprofit social service agencies or they obtain other non-social work related jobs. I'll just say that we didn't collect any formal data on this. This is just kind of what we hear from our members, social work students who have graduated or are trying to get into the field. So this isn't based on any formal data that we've collected. As far as our efforts, recommendations, and plans, the Guam chapter NASW held our annual regional training conference titled Intergenerational Healing, Supporting Families Across the Lifespan. One of the goals of this year's conference was to provide our professional social work community with the resources to better understand the concept of trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed social workers rely on their knowledge about trauma to respond to clients in ways that convey respect and compassion, honor self-determination, and enable the rebuilding of healthy interpersonal skills and coping strategies. So expanding the trauma-informed perspective to various agencies such as law enforcement, healthcare settings, schools, and others allows us to address social issues that have long challenged our community that are deeply rooted in intergenerational experiences of hurt and trauma. Social workers who work in particularly challenging settings may experience high rates of turnover in the workplace due to compassion fatigue and burnout. Variables such as high caseloads, low salaries, low morale, and emotionally demanding responsibilities contribute to higher incidences of compassion fatigue. On the contrary, a healthier workforce leads to better client outcomes and lower staff turnover. In 2021, NASW updated the Code of Ethics to include self-care in an effort to highlight its significance to competent and ethical social work practice. It states that social workers make efforts toward professional and personal self-care. Social work agencies, organizations, and educational institutions are encouraged to promote organizational practices, policies, and materials to support social workers' self-care. The Guam chapter NASW intends to continue providing social work professionals with tools to practice genuine self-care. Our organization recognizes that there are other points that can be made regarding the complexities of recruitment and retention of social workers on Guam, and that this list merely scratches the surface. You can feel free to contact our chapter if you would like to meet or discuss any of these ideas in more detail. And we are eager to continue working toward creating balanced and sustainable opportunities for our social worker professionals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I also have a testimony from the University of Guam, and I think it's relevant, so I'm going to read excerpts. I'm not going to read the whole thing. This has been passed out to the senators, but I'm going to read excerpts for all of you to contemplate as well. So this is written by Therese P. Diaz, PhD, MSW, who's the chairperson of the University of Guam Division of Social Work. She wrote to me and the senators on behalf of the Division of Social Work at the School of Health at the University of Guam. Right, so she talks about this month, 21 of our seniors in the program will receive their BSW degrees at the UOG Spring Commencement Ceremony. They've graduated 22 students per year in the last 5 years. They're accredited and recognized by NASW at the entry-level degree for the profession. In addition, we have an MOU with the University of Hawaii Manoa Thompson School of Social Work and Public Health that provides the opportunity for our BSW grads to stay here on island and pursue an MSW degree through distance education technology. There are clear benefits to this partnership. Graduates with the BSW qualify for the advanced standing option that gives them the opportunity to get their MSW from an accredited program within 1 year. Our students in the UH MSW DE program pay in-state tuition at $650 per credit compared to non-resident tuition at 1,402 per credit. Students attend online synchronous classes and can stay on island while getting their MSW degree, and the goal of the EUH MSWDE program is to attract students to stay on Guam after they receive their degree. Via the UOG-UH partnership, graduates of the UH MSWDE program can attend UOG commencement in the presence of their family and friends. Overall, the UH MSWDE program has graduated approximately 30 MSW students from Guam, with an additional 8 students that will graduate this spring 2023 and 1 in 2024. This year, 14 students from our BSW program were accepted into the 2023-2024 MSW cohort. This is our biggest cohort to date since our partnership began in 2012. That's 14 students in 1 year. Given these growing numbers of BSW and MSW graduates, we are confident that we are effectively educating and training future social workers in Guahan to enter the social services workforce and to serve our island communities. The barriers to recruitment for Government of Guam positions that many of our graduates report, however, is the lengthy hiring process through Department of Administration. It is not uncommon for us to hear that graduates have waited 6 months to a year to receive notice of their rating or eligibility for an interview. As a consequence, graduates may opt for employment elsewhere, including nonprofit organizations, jobs unrelated to social work, or off-island opportunities. One recommendation to improve recruitment and retention is to build a pipeline between our BSW program and social service agencies and organizations. This can be facilitated via competitive paid internship positions and departmental policy changes to enable a more intrinsic hiring process for interns that an agency or organization is interested in employing. Both the BSW and MSW programs require extensive hours in field practicum. For example, BSW students are required to intern at a field practicum site for 210 hours per semester for 2 semesters. They are placed at sites such as Guam Behavioral Health, or the CPS, or DYA, and the Judiciary of Guam. Field practicum gives both the student and the agencies, organizations, an opportunity to decide whether there's a good fit for future permanent employment. We acknowledge that recruitment and retention issues are critical and complex beyond what is covered here. We remain committed to ongoing discussions and actions dedicated to addressing these issues, and feel free to contact and work together. I'm summarizing. That's written by Tressa P. Diaz, PhD, MSW, the chairperson of the UOG Division of Social Work. I guess what she's pointing out here that is in common with the NASW Guam chapter's testimony is the lengthy hiring process through DOA. This is the reason why we definitely invited DOA. I feel like they are critical to this. They have to answer, and we've asked them actually over the years to answer to whether, I've been told they were supposed to prioritize social worker recruitment, and so I'm glad to hear from you that you've received your lists, and that it's a matter that they're declining. So the lists are small to begin with. They're declining interviews, and you're actually hiring the ones that proceed through the interview, but there's just not enough, which is strange, I guess, because, and we're hearing now the issues from graduation into recruitment into the Government of Guam. There's a huge delay. So that might be contributing, and the other things that you've discussed. All right, so I want to thank you, first of all, Public Health, for your efforts in coming up with these ideas to entice social workers to stay and to join your agency. So can you just tell us the policies that the governor implemented regarding hazardous pay, the night differentials, all of that, those are still in place, and do those look permanent to you?
Madam Speaker, they appear to be permanent at this time. They are the incentives we have. They are the incentives that we are promoting. But I also want to pause and just kind of reflect on the different organizations that have testified this afternoon. With regard to the board, they talked about licensing incentives, something we've already presented. And I want to say this because we all seem to be on the same page in different parts of our efforts in the front of hiring, recruiting, providing incentives to our social work practitioners. but there was no pre-meeting between any of us. And so, I do want to share that with you, that we all have a common sense of direction about moving forward. For the Guam chapter, NASW, they talked about also, licensing and self-care. And we've also touched on that. And so we also have the pay adjustments that we are proposing for those who pursue licensing. We also have the self-care, but also with Dr. Diaz's comment with regard to that lengthy process that also NASW Guam chapter mentioned. We also talked about that, and I just want you and all those that did design policy and put policy in place. Can we give some real consideration to the UOG BSW graduates who have successful completion of on-site BS practicum students at I'm saying public health and social services. Obviously, I'm looking for public health and social services to increase its recruitment effort. But you could definitely extend this to all government and Guam placements in which they are successful, that they be offered a position upon graduation. Yes, I am saying no interview. I'm saying the interview took place because of their placement. Their supervisors, the division head, have determined that these individuals are suitable for employment. And a person who graduates, unless it's changed with DOA, with a bachelor's in social work at the University of Guam does qualify for a social worker 2 position. That hasn't changed, right? No, that hasn't changed. I'm just getting nods. I just want to be sure. It's been
I'm
a
all
while
for
since
it, and I know that
it's been
the
a while since I've
lieutenant.
been in the profession, so.
I'm all for that, and I heard the lieutenant governor. I talked to him, and he also suggests this. But what is DOA's position on this, as far as you know? Because
we
they are the
haven't
one
had
in charge of the merit system.
Yeah, we have not discussed this with the Department of Administration, to be transparent with everyone, but this is something that we wanted to present in terms of policy. Now, I know that there is a merit bonus, and we talk about that for outstanding performance, and I understand that's at 3.5%. And so in order to also provide another incentive to our social workers, recognizing the compassionate fatigue, the high turnover, the burnout, and many other variables that they work with, hoping to get more staff on to support them through the process, equipment, and just a whole myriad of things, that if they do perform satisfactorily, that they too would get an incentive adjustment. Not 3.5, but something perhaps in the area about satisfactory, about maybe 2.5. We're also looking like a signing on for someone who didn't graduate from the university, someone who comes to Guam with a degree. Could we do a signing on bonus of sorts? We're looking at what we've heard and what we've seen put in place, and how we can maybe fashion a policy that will support recruitment and retention for the social work practice on Guam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate all of these, and they look fine and good ideas. My issue is, can they be implemented? How soon? Why are they not implemented already? What is the impediment? And that's what I'm trying to get at through this hearing. I want DOA to tell us. I've been told that we're not able to hire other people because DOA has prioritized hiring social workers, and they can only process one class at a time or something. I'm trying to get to the bottom of that as well. I want to know, why can't they process environmental health workers as a priority, as well as social workers as a priority? And if this is what you need, I need to know from them whether they are able to do this, or we need to look at law changes. But these look to me that if DOA has to have a finding on these things in order for us to proceed, I think. But Director, have you discussed these recruitment of social workers issues with DOA? What is your understanding of how urgent this is being addressed by DOA, or what is DOA doing to help you solve our issues?
Sorry, Speaker. With regard to the discussion with the Director of Department of Administration, no, I have not had an in-person conversation with him on this. Some of this we were putting together for this afternoon's oversight, and as our acting chief also shared, some of these ideas were also coming from our staff, and just asking them, just what would it take to retain you? What would it take to recruit others in the profession, to bring them on board? And so some of these ideas also came from them. But no, I have not had an opportunity to discuss it, but I definitely will pursue that with Director Byrd.
All right, well, I know that I've discussed this with you because it's been a very big concern. And even prior to the emergency being declared for CPS or for BOSA, even prior to that, this has been an issue. And it's always been not enough, personnel at CPS or right, to handle all the cases. And then it became declared an emergency. And I just want to know, I mean, we went through all of those hoops. So why can't we get DOA's attention and expedite it? And I'm telling you, I talked to you because I was told they are telling people they are not processing these other classes of employees that need to be hired as well because they're trying to prioritize social workers. But you've not talked to him. That doesn't make any sense to me, that it hasn't become a priority between the two directors. Like, what's going on with the hiring of our social workers? We're getting reports of delay. That doesn't make sense to me, that at your level, that's not being addressed. On director to director level, what is the priority of our government? We've all admitted we need to prioritize that. We've tried to do everything, and we just need to follow up.
Madam Speaker, if I may, I just also want to clarify, part of my response is in relation to some of the ideas about the satisfactory performance incentive, licensing incentive. Those things I've not discussed with, the director of DOA, but I will make a request to meet with them and discuss this further with them.
So can I just ask, there's also been a statement that there's a delay in licensing. What's the issue there?
So I would like to comment on that is not true. For the past several years, the board, every month, we review and approve licensure applications for all levels. We continue to do it monthly, and we've licensed people who use that to get jobs within the federal government here on island, people who've transferred over wanting to get hired with Fleet and Family Support or different areas. Private companies are requiring that their applicants be licensed, and so we have entertained and approved those. We have also, because we are able to do so under the Social Work Practice Act, we have also entertained at least one complaint and investigated and took that through. So even though the rules and regs are not yet promulgated, we are actively receiving applications and approving those, and also receiving complaints about licensed applicants.
All right, so do you have a backlog?
No.
All right, and what about graduates? Do they have to be licensed right away?
I don't believe that is in the Social Work Practice Act. Within our rules and regs, it doesn't say they have to be licensed right away, but they do need to be licensed to be employed if they've passed our 6-month period after the promulgation of the rules and regs. So I know a lot of people who are looking to graduate now in the spring, they're gathering all their documents, because we've had interns as well within my agency, and so they're looking to get their applications in, because those who've interned under me, I've told them, we're working very hard on this, and you only have 6 months from the time the legislature promulgates to get that exemption period done, and then you have to take the test.
All right, so just clarify, graduates, let's say from last year, can be hired in the government of Guam under social worker positions without being licensed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that, you all agree? So there should be no delay in getting them hired at public health for licensing delays, right? And what we're talking about, or what you're talking about, is that when these rules and the new rules and regs are in place, then licensing changes, and some people who are not required to be licensed will be required to be licensed.
So everyone from the
Yeah.
time that it's promulgated must be licensed. And there's a 6-month, based on the law, there's a 6-month period after the rules and regs are promulgated that you're able to be licensed without taking the exam.
Okay, like a
So that's the
grandfathering
only
in of.
Yes.
All right, but so that's good to hear, but that doesn't address why we think we can't get enough people in, from the graduates into the agencies. And what about between agencies, Director? Are you losing employees to other agencies? Is there higher pay for social workers in other agencies versus
Speaker,
CPS?
yeah, to your question, it's not so much the higher pay. I would say a lot of times it's because of the work environment. BOSA is a high-stress job. Our social workers are behind us
But
here.
do we have that confirmed? Like, how do we know?
we've actually been told by those who are going to transfer that they need to balance their personal life, they need to go and resume other
Okay.
activities in their life. They've actually shared that with the staff when they're exiting.
All right. Well, I can appreciate that for sure.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your recommendations as a whole for this field, that we need to address the type of thing that this work, we're going to have those types of issues. And so those of you who've dedicated your lives to this, I understand. All right, I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to pass it to the panel because I know everyone has a lot of questions. But thank you for the updates on the clearances. Now, I feel confident now that we've covered every area of clearance. We've got past arrest records, current cases that are not convicted yet, any cases that had been dismissed, expunged, not expunged. We're still working on the expunged, or they're not going to give you the expunged? It sounded to me when I met with the court that they were going to allow you access to that, but I'm looking at what you said. It says pretrial, probation, convictions, dismissed. Dismissed are not necessarily expunged, right? So we need to know about the expunged. Okay, can you get back to me, look at your stuff and get back to me during the hearing? All right, I'm going to open it up to my Vice Chair, Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the presentation with regards to the information provided. Granted, I mean, I'm sure this is a very challenging job, but I also recognize that people choose different professions for different reasons and what motivates them. I know this is not going to be the venue, Madam Speaker, but I certainly hope we come back to talk about the requests we had made on the actual program, because I'm a little even more concerned about the fact, and we do get calls obviously from foster parents, of even hearing that the compensation for the stipends have not been received in like 8 months in one particular case of a foster parent. I think those are the issues that our people, certainly we do, and our people want to hear about in finding why that's the case. The other factor, and again, you might make it a staffing issue, but I have to tell you, and those of us who've worked for administrations, when there's an issue of crisis, the governor generally gets us all together and prioritizes that operation and provides the support to that department or agency that needs that support. This continued issue about Department of Administration not processing or responding in a way that one would consider expeditious, especially from what the Speaker had relayed, that that's the information she's been provided, and yet we're hearing at the other end, there's these long-term delays. I can't imagine applying for a job, having gotten my degree, waiting 8 months, a year, or whatever, before I ever hear back from the government of Guam. And yet we also know that when select people want to get hired in the government of Guam, it happens overnight. This government moves as fast as we want it to, and we can also block it when we choose to. We know that. You've been around this game a long time, Art, at the head of your department, and it's just a question of priority. And it's a question of putting the pressure where it needs to be, because you lose the opportunity because people have to make a living. I mean, they might have family to support, they have obligations. Even if they're a single person, they probably still have bills to pay. All of us, I don't know who's privileged, right? I mean, if you are, then you probably wouldn't be applying for a social work position. But I think those are things that can be made. I mean, you guys were sold to the public as the agents of change. You're supposed to be better, faster, smarter than anybody who's come before you, and I just don't see. I see a continued repetition of the same old issues. And from your level, from the level of the governor, if this is really a priority, because she was very critical, certainly of our administration. I'm not in social work, obviously, but very critical of the previous administration in assisting and facilitating, especially children in our community that are being abused. And yet I'm still seeing and hearing the same old, and that's the curse, I guess, of being around long enough. You can measure over time performance, and we're acting in some cases as if we're just starting for the very first time. And that's the frustration at my end, because when I hear that a child has not had a visit from CPS in 8 or 9 months, except to get a call prior to a court hearing to check the status of the child, then it makes it not so surprising that we may have had, again, it's alleged, and I will follow these 2 particular cases that have come up. I will follow them because I want to know what fell through the cracks. And how do you have a situation of someone in a home who may have been abusing a child for 4 or 5 years? I'd like to know how often that child was visited and what options does that child have to know or relay that they are being harmed or abused to CPS. Or the case of the other case that came to our attention with regards to a child being placed in the home of an individual that has had cases or allegations placed against them. I want to know what kind of counseling that child's received. I want to know what kind of counseling the parents have received. Even though I know understandably these children come into our care and your care in particular because there's probably obvious issues in that household. It could be drugs, could be other reasons as to why children come into the hands of the government. But at the same time, we have a greater obligation. If we are going to take custody of these children, which you have the authority to do, then we have to ensure that these children are safe. And that's not what I'm hearing. And I don't even know, what is the stipend for a child that's in foster care? How much would be received to take care of that child on a monthly basis? What is the stipend? Just so that we in the public knows, because I actually have no idea what the stipend is.
Senator, for a child who's newborn to 11 years of age, my understanding is that it's $576.
Okay.
And if you are 12 to 18 years of age, it's $779.
700 and what?
79
Okay.
per month.
So who processes these checks for these families, these foster families? Who processes? Does it come out of public health? So can I get an explanation? I understand I appreciate all the information that you provided with regards to social worker compensation, but this to me, and I think to the public, is more concerning is, why is there this delay?
So we call that the foster care maintenance payments.
Okay.
That's done monthly. Our social workers provide what we call like a placement notice to our admin unit to say where the child is. And we do process based on even court orders that are received saying that these families are to receive this foster care maintenance.
So why would there be an 8-month delay? Why would I have a foster parent contacting me and telling me that they've not received this foster care maintenance payment since August of last year?
We do not know of any that have been delayed 8 months. It will be a court order that determines that payment. So if there's no court order, then there is no payment. But we can definitely look into it, but not that we are aware of.
Do all foster parents receive stipends or no? Or what would these maintenance payments? Is it if they take in a foster child, are they compensated to provide the money for that child and that child's care?
So not all households do receive this foster care maintenance. Like I said, it will require a court order to initiate this payment. So it will be through the court that we would request it, and we await that.
Well, it would be good to check, because I'm sure the foster parent, if they're of a misunderstanding, that's a pretty big misunderstanding. And then the other issue, like I mentioned, is the lack of actual physical visits into the home. I mean, I see you have just a very small amount of people here that even do the evaluations, the home evaluations and placements. Do I see that right? There's just 2? SW3, 2 social worker 3s for all the hundreds of children that you have?
So they are responsible for the licensed foster care.
Okay.
So those are licensed families. So we do have relative care placements that are other social workers in the different sections, like, for example, case management, that do go out in the field to visit the children.
So why would we have such a long period of time of no home visit at all to check? I mean, we can all put on a nice presentation for a short time and have our best efforts, right? You're coming to my house, gosh, I'm getting everything nice and tidy, but is that my home every day? I mean, what efforts are being made? Because I am concerned. I mean, these things are slipping through the cracks because these inspections are not happening. And there's not a mechanism under which these children, especially I can't imagine a young child who doesn't even understand what's happening to them, who's probably scared, who has no sense of security, probably, taken out of a traumatic situation in their home, placed in a situation that is not secure as we would like it to be, and how do they even relay that they're in a situation of further distress? I mean, I'd like to think all good, adults are good people, but obviously we're finding that's not the case, and people that have these issues are attracted to children and unfortunately try to surround themselves or get into a field or work in an area where they can access children. I mean, I don't know how a poor child can protect themselves. So we're entrusted to protect these children, and if we're not doing these things, then my goodness, to me, that's a crisis. I don't want to sit here, and I'm sure we will when we follow up, because we are going to continue to pursue this issue. I mean, like DOC. Do we have to call a hearing at the Guam legislature to bring these issues to light, or those of you that are in positions of authority and responsibility should be banging the doors to bring this to light? I mean, the commercial's cute on TV with the kids calling the governor on the screen, but if these kids right now are getting abused or mistreated out there under our care, our supposed care, then that just ain't so cute. Because they're the most vulnerable ones that have been brought into the system. And I think we have every reason to be upset and angry and frustrated to see that happening, because these children are vulnerable. And if we're not undertaking our responsibility to ensure regular visits to ensure that these children are a safe environment, and there's not proper counseling there for those children, or the family in this particular case of this child, this young boy that was placed. I know you guys say, oh, we can't talk about it. We can't talk about it. It's under investigation. But I know we're not isolated just to these cases, and for that to still be happening is very problematic, and I want to know what's going to be done to address that. Because that just ain't okay. And it's unfortunate we have sick people in our community that harm children, but for those of us that are not, for God's sake, we need to do something more to protect them. I know, Madam Speaker, this was not the forum for this, but my goodness, that to me is the more pressing issue of how we address. The other stuff we can very easily address where there's a need, but where these children are being put in a position of harm and where we're helping facilitate that, I think is very problematic, and I think we need to get to the bottom of that. I appreciate the fact that we're doing more investigation. I wish it had been done sooner. I think it could have protected these other children. I don't know if we just sit around and we just, go over the checklist and that's it. That's the extent of our effort. Senator Terlaje pointed out the last hearing, she just had to get on social media and look this guy's name up. So if that kind of stuff is falling through the cracks, then all this other stuff is nice, it's window dressing, but it doesn't really address the key issues that we have, particularly in the fact, and maybe you can tell me, I don't have enough staff, whoever does. Art, we've been in this business a long time, whoever does. How do we maximize what we have? How do we prioritize, and how do we facilitate where there's a time of need the resources of the government to assist till we can get to some level of stability? I mean, do we have regular contacts even online with parents, just an update or informational, or if they have question for them, maybe they can't all physically come down to one place, but you can do it online. I mean, those are the kind of things we want to see and hear about. So that, I'm sure they have moments of issues or challenges that they have, and who do they reach out to talk to? How can they and how can we facilitate keeping in contact with them? We have to do more. We're not doing enough, and we're worried about pay raises and everything else, but we can't even ensure the safety of these children. That, to me, is problematic in terms of where our focus is and what we need to do to address these issues, because, are we going to hear more? Is there going to be another case we're going to hear about? We don't want our children that are already traumatized to be further traumatized. I mean, we failed if we allow this to continue to happen. But and thank God, we got a lot of good people out there. But if they're expecting, for whatever reason, they're under the impression they're supposed to get a stipend for this child and they've not received it, or the fact that they're saying, no one has come physically to my home to check my child or me or what's going on, except to call before a court hearing to get a status update. That ain't cutting it, Arthur, and even you know that. You worked for many years in adult protective services on Guam, you know that. And if you got to go out and do those inspections, then hey, all hands on deck if there's a need to do that, because we just can't skate through this issue at this day and age. If we fail at this, who cares about what else we do in the government of Guam if we can't take care of these vulnerable children? So I just want to relay that, Madam Speaker. I hope that we come back again. I'm sure you will. So that we can actually get into the weeds of this issue and find out where there are other deficiencies and what do we need to do to bring these things to light, to address these concerns. Because, public health is telling us one thing. I'm sure we're being approached by foster parents raising these concerns. And You know, I'm assuming they have no reason to be dishonest about the concerns that they're raising, because they've already volunteered to take these children in. And I'm sure they want the best, as we do, the best for these children for the time that they have them. And if there are deficiencies in our ability to assist them in that process, I think that issue needs to be identified. And then I think we need to know, what do we need to do to address it? So with that, Madam Speaker, I don't have any comment at this point.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Teichgui.
Good afternoon, everyone, to the public health and all the hardworking individuals there. We definitely recognize that you are, shorthanded, like everywhere else. But, coming up with incentives and ideas are important. But I'd like to thank the speaker, actually, for having this oversight. The first oversight that she held, and then after this issue came up, she quickly had a second oversight. So I greatly appreciate the efforts made by the speaker. But it's true, after the first oversight that we had with the foster children, the issue, I was approached just that next day, that following day. And it wasn't just the comment that this foster parent told me that she's not been paid for 3 months, and trying to understand that it's a court order, but if it's a licensed foster parent and a child has been placed in that licensed foster parent's home, then shouldn't there be a monthly stipend that comes monthly on the clock? I mean, why do you have to continue to, go to a court to make sure this stipend comes them monthly? It should be monthly, and there is no reason for it. But there was something more disturbing than that, what she told me. She actually took in some children, and then found out later the siblings were also the children's siblings were also in need of a foster care. And of course, we always try and put the kids together. But of course, she couldn't do it. But she felt that she was being so pressured by public health to take those children in, and in fear that she was not going to get her stipend if she didn't take them. She really felt that intimidated by public health. Now, that was disturbing. I understand the importance of putting children, siblings all together in one home. But if a foster parent is telling you, I can't do it, it's hard, and yet public health is continuing to push and push and push, I think that first, I'm not able to do it, thank you very much, we'll move on. But to hound her, to take the child, that was disturbing. And even that same night, Senator Brown was approached by another foster parent. And then we started collecting all our notes and people, because they were watching the public hearing. In fact, one of them mentioned that the guardian enlightenment that we were talking about, I think she left island a year ago, older woman, I want to say not Holbrook, but she sent a letter to us right away after the public hearing and said, they never come and visit. I've had them for a whole year, and they never once, public health came to visit to see if the child was okay. So there is definitely something. I'd like to see a roster, a report that's put together monthly of every foster parent, and to show that you did visit that child in that home. A report, and that way, it's not he said, she said, but you actually have it in writing. Art, you mentioned in your May 2nd, 2023 letter about the improvements to protect foster children. Can you please check the internet, Google the name?
That is, Senator, that has been included. It's not so much to make a determination, but more for potential leads for us to confirm with proper authorities of any reports that we can do on online search. It is part of it.
Just incorporate it, because I'm looking at it here.
All right,
I don't see anything
I
that says,
see.
Google search.
Okay,
It's as simple
we'll
as
do
that.
an update, including all
Yeah.
the background criminal checks we're doing and which ones are indicators. We'll provide that, an
Also-
update to the Speaker's office.
Okay, also with regards to a foster parent who's applying to be a foster parent, do you ever check with them? I mean, I'm sure there's personal things that are asked about that foster parent. And one of them could be, I don't know if it's already requested, are you currently seeing anyone? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? Is that question ever asked to the foster parent?
Hi, Senator. So that question should be answered based on the application process that they filled out.
Okay, and do you, especially if they're not married and they're not living in the home, but you know that this foster parent is seeing somebody, do you also do a check on that individual? Regardless if they're not married or anything like that, but they're seeing each other, do you also check? Because you're knowing that individual comes to that house.
I do not have a question. I do not have the answer
Okay.
in regards to licensing, but I do know as a CPS worker, those questions are asked,
Okay.
and we actually get information on that person.
Then may I make a request that you do the research on that individual that that foster parent is seeing, okay?
Yes,
Just
Your Honor.
look at, because that's what happened on this last one. It was a boyfriend.
Senator, there is a system that they'll be implementing, and that is really a kind of a quick checklist. Anyone that's been licensed and who was there, the adult members, any additional members, or any family member, as you say, boyfriend perhaps that came into the picture later on after the application was approved, that also will be checked. But also we are now also going to be vetting any of the children who turn 18. And so that's a progressive process that we're doing in terms of just tracking the changes in the household.
Well, Art, I think that it should also be indicated on the application that if there's any change in this situation,
Yes, Senator.
that person must, report it. Like, I'm now seeing this individual. And if
Correct.
if you're going there and, on a surprise visit, you might catch that person, and that's
And
one
to-
less,
And to your point, Senator, actually in our presentation, we are implementing a periodic change report within 10 days of any changes in the household that the foster parent would be required to submit that change report over to our office. And in that change report, should it surface or be identified that there is another adult member in the household, we will then run a background check on that such person at that time.
Okay, thank you, Art.
You're welcome.
Also, with regards to overtime, as I'm looking at this, and
Yes.
I might have slipped past, but I'm really concerned. When you have overtime last paid in January of 2023, overtime should be paid right away. Right away. It shouldn't be in January. You know how many months ago that is? No wonder we're losing our social workers. This should never be here. Pay them. They worked, they did the job. And you're talking about recruiting? They're leaving because they're not getting paid, not just because their application is getting through to DOA. And Art, why haven't you spoken to DOA? I mean, the speaker asked you a question, have you spoken to them? And you said, no, you haven't. And so my question is, why not?
With regards to the incentives that were put together today, no, I have not had an opportunity to discuss that with Director of DOA. That's what I was referring to. Like, for example, being able to onboard someone after successful completion of their internship with a public health office or any government office in terms of setting policy. I've not discussed that with Director Byrne. And so I've not done that. These were some ideas, even with the satisfactory performance today, still providing an incentive, the licensing incentive, training incentive. Those are things I've not discussed. These were some of the ideas that we put together for this afternoon's oversight, and now we have to take that and move it to the next step. As the speaker said, I will be discussing this with Director Byrne, just what we can do and what would it take, what are the systems that we would need to pursue to make these things an option for social workers as they pursue licensing or training on the job.
All right, and I hope after this oversight, you get on your cell phone and WhatsApp Mr. Byrne and tell him, I need to meet you tomorrow. But most especially, do you have the funding to pay for the overtime? Do you have the funding?
Funding is not an issue at this point.
Okay, then why is it taking so long to pay the overtime? So please,
Yes, we will take care of the overtime.
I'm going to follow up on that.
Yes.
The overtime, most especially.
All right.
As far as incentives are concerned, is there anything like, how they did with the teachers way back when we were short with teachers? They actually paid the tuition, the school for an individual to become a teacher. Are there incentives like that to pay tuition for individuals who want to be a social worker and then they come back like and when they graduate, they have to work for government of Guam for 3 years? Is there anything like that? Nada? Okay.
So
I'm talking about full-on tuition from day one,
So
paying it.
we do have the merit scholarship, and so I'm familiar with it because I was a recipient, right? Graduates, high school graduates with a certain GPA, depending on the population of the student population of that school, there is a certain number that are awarded the merit scholarship.
I'm not talking
right?
about merit scholarship.
Right. And so as part of that, you are required to now go to school at UOG,
Right.
and then you have a priority status when you apply for a government job. Preferential hiring.
Right, right.
So there's no guarantee, but if all aspects are equal, you have preference. And then there was also another scholarship at one time, which I did apply for when I was going for my master's, which was it Doc Sanchez?
Doc
Yeah, there was a
Sanchez.
ProTech scholarship.
Oh, the ProTech, yes.
However, at the time that I applied for it,
very small.
I went through a lot of hoops, and then I was told that it was not funded.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
that really is another
think-
option. But with that, also, if you graduated under that scholarship, there was a requirement that you do apply for a job within the government.
Okay, I understand there's scholarships out there, for those who really need. I'm
Right.
just talking about an incentive.
Yeah,
So anybody who wants
two
to.
are government funded,
Yeah,
and they
but-
do have an incentive of preferential hire for someone who applies for a government of Guam job.
Well, I'm kind of talking about, if I want to be a social worker and I find out there's a program out there that I can just go to school, I don't have to go and, for a loan, not a loan, but a scholarship or anything like that. I can just go and say, okay, I'm signing over. You have to pay for my full tuition, and then after I'm done with school,
Right.
that's what I'm looking
UOG
at.
also has a social work scholarship.
Yeah, but
so they can
that's
speak-
also short in
Right,
funding.
right. They're
Very
always
short
short
in
in
funding.
funding.
Yeah,
but
very much
there's
so.
options out there.
Yeah, but I think that we just need to, look at other incentives,
Yes.
and that could be one where they don't have to. If it's not available, then there should automatically have some funding for that. I understand it's not really short in perspective of, social workers graduating, we're getting them, but the burnt out rate is really high. We're looking at numbers of graduates, and it looks all great. But then you're not seeing the part where they're leaving. And that's the big issue, the burnout rate, So overtime, please, Art, please don't forget.
Will do, ma'am.
UOG, a lengthy process. Okay, it was covered earlier. PowerPoint tuition. Okay, and application. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to get. Okay, most of my questions were made comments to and things, but greatly appreciate you being here this late hour. Everyone that's here, even those in the back who's not there, just your presence is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Taitigui. Senator San Agustin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I want to thank the panel for being here. I like your presentation. I see the percentage, the incentives and stuff like that you want to present. Being the appropriation guy, I don't see the dollars, so I like numbers, okay? Let's start with that. The next one is, you identified if you graduate with UG with BSW, graduates be offered SW2. I just want to know, what is the marketing program for social workers? What is the marketing program that is being used? I'm retired Army, okay, and I know the marketing program in the military. At the 11th grade, you're given a card. You're given an offer. You want to join, when you graduate, you can join the military. We got a place for you. Do you have any program? Because I know DOA doesn't have it. GPD, nobody has. Does public health have one? Probably not. It should be a real simple question, right? You probably don't. And that's the biggest shortfall for any government agency. Everybody can talk about, let's give you initiative, let's give you free tuition. Stop. It doesn't work that way. It's like what law enforcement is doing up at GC. They got the Balea program. Sure, join Balea, you got a chance at law enforcement. But if you don't qualify, there's no chance you're going to get into law enforcement. And the qualification is you don't have a record, you stay good for the whole time you're in Balea, then you got a shot. My question would be on public health. With all these initiatives, I like your presentation, okay? Don't get me wrong. But I like to know if there's a marketing program, like if somebody's going to University of Guam, they say, hey, I'm going to be heading towards a social worker program. When I get to my junior year, and if everybody's watching them, because you can find out all the information at university, who's in their junior year, what program they're at, offer them that. You talked about licensing, like they do in teachers, unfortunately. They don't even have a marketing program for DOE. In order to graduate as a teacher and get hired, you got to pass the praxis. In order to graduate as a social worker, you got to get a license. Those all should be all related, but then offer them a job. So you don't have to have job fairs. I mean, DOE does that a lot. I guess they have not much else to do. You don't need a job fair. When somebody's at University of Guam and they're in their junior year, and you tell them, if you get your license during this process and you graduate, when they walk down to get their degree, they wear a sash saying public health. They're hired. You don't have to do a lot. And then you can use that, like similar to the Merit or the Protec or Doc Sanchez, but come up with a program. Come up with something that could help the current social workers move up the ladder. Because they're not going to be offered these benefits. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a, what do you got here, 25%? Shoot, the 22 general pay plan, it's already there. It's nothing new. You're not going to join because you're going to get the pay. You're already there. Incentive pay. Hazardous pay, that's automatically, that's in law. If there's anything hazardous, you get 10%. It's a no-brainer. Incentive pay to do what? To do the job, you're going to get hired? I'm trying to understand that. Why don't you just find a way to work with Shane at DOA and come up with a specifically public health social worker position, change your description, then raise the salary. Why are you doing this 25? I don't like I don't care for the 25%. I'd rather see that there be a pay change. Job description, change the pay. Because why you're not no more this, you're this. And everybody's going after their masters, automatically pay raise. This automatically going to be a social worker too. Great. And then when you become a social worker two, then you don't become a 3 until you get a doctorate? Wrong answer. Every time you get a certificate, raise the pay. Because the expectation's there. I believe that that's how you can keep you. You get a license, you get certification. Every time you increase your knowledge, you move up in pay. The expectation will be there. Because I know for a fact for teachers that become tomorrow teachers, for example, at DOE, they join, they start at the lowest pay, they go to school, next thing you know, their pay raise. They keep going up. I know several of them, because when I was a revenue and tax, they applied. I told them, go and work as a tomorrow teacher. Some of them couldn't really speak tomorrow. But at the end of the day, they learned it. And they moved up in pay. They moved up so much in pay, they said it was a blessing. They stayed there for over 25, 26 years. In addition to their term in revenue and tax, the pay kept going up. Is the pay going up for social workers or public health? Answer probably is no. That's why you're doing this presentation. You got the current staffing. Is this the current staffing? Is this, you have 38 or 48 folks in the social worker? I don't know. Is that true? That's current staffing, right? You know, because earlier everybody was talking about foster. I had a bunch of questions, but I think that's beaten up to death already. The key here is trying to get social workers up. Keep you employed, keep you working, and reward you for the efforts you put in. There are a lot of lessons you're going to learn, and we're all going to learn. I'm currently a senator. I'm not a director. I'm not going to tell you, director, how to run your job, but do the best you can. Lessons learned. Because when you come before us, like this session or the budget, that's our job. You got to answer to it. Just do the best you can, because I can't fault you. What happened yesterday is yesterday. You know, for some of you that watch I always like to tease about that movie, The Lion King, when that monkey came around and hit the lion, it's in the head, and he goes, what'd you do that for? It's in the past, it doesn't matter. You need to fix what you did wrong yesterday and move forward. I mean, I'm trying to be very positive, put a little humor in your, in this thing. Because you know what? We're not here to beat you up. We're not here to insult you. We just want you to correct what the issue is. Get it fixed. Because none of these social workers anywhere in the public health should have to put their head down. You're doing the best you can. Unfortunately, you're probably not getting the support. And it's obvious because if you're not getting people who hired when you need them hired, we'll bring it up with Mr. Byrne. That's the easy one. Art, I know you can reach out. You can talk to Ed. Ed will help you out. Shane will help you. Everybody's here to help each other. It's all about Guam. It's not about me or the speaker or anybody here. No, it's about all of us. But I honestly believe if you put a marketing program together, get it blessed by DOA, and that's the market, that's how you hire, I'll tell you what, half the battle is won already. United States Armed Forces wins the battle that way. Every year. They're even reaching a point where they can't even recruit people. Even though they give the card, they give all the education packages. Some folks are not going for it. But social workers, there are a lot of people out there, and a lot of you here would love to get an increase based on your current qualification because you have a different program, you're a different status. You're not just the normal social workers. You know that. So change the job description. And that should be easy. I honestly believe that should be easy. Revenue and Tax is doing that. They've been doing that for years. Changing the job description, it's even harder to become an investigator there. And I know it should be hard because you folks already, I think most of you are social workers tonight, right? Yeah, she's like, yeah, they are. You've done it. After so many years, so many classes, your pay should go up. That's the incentive. You stay long enough, you get different trainings, go up. Change it, and it'll work. And then when we talk about stuff like this, because we're going to see you for the budget. You can talk all about this. If we don't see it in the budget, we ain't never going to see it. And when you say, I need a supplemental, I'm going to look at you and say, you had your shot. And every one of my colleagues are going to say, we talked about it. Why didn't you put it in the budget? The worst thing will happen is you won't get everything, but it's a start. Because I think every year the budget has been going up. And public health, you need help. I mean, we're in the same building. I think half of your public health is in the same building where my office is at. And you know, I see most of your folks, and I'm like, hey, we're all struggling in the same parking lot. But you know what? I honestly believe, I have faith that you can take care of social workers, get it done, protect our foster children out there. If somebody moves into a house that they weren't registered, it's like Gura. You know that if you're a resident of Gura and you got a new boyfriend, you cannot stay. You cannot stay in that house until you're checked in. There's a lot of rules that happen in other agencies. Apply it to your own agency. Right. It'll work. And with that, Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator San Agustin. Okay, if we could recap a little bit. You have something to say?
I'm sorry, I just, based on all the testimony I've heard, I had, I've been a social worker for over 25 years, and when I listen to kind of problems, I try to take it from a proactive approach, right? So while public health is doing their very important investigations, I think it's also important that we bring to light that we need to look at how can we prevent that, right? Not just leaving the burden on Child Protective Services. So one of the things I thought of is that we do have laws in place about mandated reporters, right? I work for Head Start. Head Start requires our staff to do FBI background checks. Why don't we, in the same way that the mandated reporter talks about those who, in the course of their employment, come in contact with kids, why don't we require FBI background checks on those who fall under that category, so that we ensure that these people with our young kids, daycares, Head Start, whatever, that they all have that clearance so that we can take care of that aspect of it, ensuring that the kids are protected from that standpoint. And then as we talked about pathways, like Ms. Tressa, Dr. Diaz talked about in her written statement, the pipeline for these graduates to become social workers. We also know that we need to alleviate the burden from these social workers, right? GCC has strengthened their credential in family services, so now they offer an associate's in family services. Within our program, we require our entry-level family service workers to obtain a credential associate's degree in family services because then they become competent caseworkers. Shifting that to that regular caseworker, low level, then frees up your social workers for high-risk cases. And that helps to alleviate the burden on our social workers. And then the last point that I wanted to make is I'm also a member of the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Peace Council. Peace is focusing on prevention, education, and community empowerment. And so one of our recommendations to the governor was as part of this worksite wellness program, we submitted a recommendation that mental wellness be incorporated into that, not just physical, but mental wellness, because we see burnout happening all over the place. I myself had a social work graduate working with us for several years who then felt like she needed to shift, right, to something not direct services because she was feeling that burnout. And now has left, she shifted to public health, she's left there and she doesn't want to do social services at all. And she was a great employee, a great caseworker. And so being proactive, looking at that, we want to ensure that all those considerations are in place. Yes, we have Worksite Wellness Program. That's a great executive order is where it started from, I believe. But including that mental wellness in there will ensure that we're trying to help our existing workers prevent that burnout and that stress overload, because when they become stressed, when they're overburdened, that's when things fall through the cracks, right? And helping to alleviate their caseload by creating these caseworker positions, these very well-educated associate degree graduates from GCC is a great option. Within our program, every semester for the past 2 years, I've had 2 to 3 interns from GCC's program, and I know they're very well prepared. So I think that's another option to look at to try and alleviate some of the burden from not just CPS, but all of our social workers in general.
Thank you for those excellent suggestions. All right. Anyone else want to say anything before I recap? Yes.
Absolutely,
Diana,
Speaker.
sorry, Diana
I'm sorry.
Calvo.
Good evening, Speaker and Senators. So this part here, my name is Diana Calvo, and this part of my oral testimony is really as a private citizen, coming from the perspective of a retired Chief Administrator for Division of Public Welfare. And I just wanted to highlight that when I was Chief Administrator, Child Welfare Services was one of the programs under my oversight. And I'd like for the individuals present here, as well as for you particularly, to understand that the continuum of services and direct services for a CPS worker starts at prevention, and it ends with discharge. And in between, where you have intake and crisis, and investigations, and then case management, the bulk of work is done really within case management. And that in all aspects, there are peak levels of stress. There's going to be continuing levels of stress depending on if it's a full moon, it's third quarter, certain periods during the year when there's typically an increase in referrals, both with domestic violence as well as with child abuse and neglect. And sometimes the work is really not supported by the bureaucracy of government. Because when I was chief, when the issue has to do with there's not enough revenues to pay for general fund programs, so when I say they, it could be BBMR, it could be wherever how the money budget flows. For us, all of our workers at CPS, social worker 3. If we hired someone, they may be a social worker 1, KPP social worker 3. When there was a BSW program implemented, the incentive was that if you are a BSW graduate, you would be hired at a social work 2 level. That was the incentive. But when a budget crunch happens, then they downgrade. So if you have a social worker 3 position, it becomes vacant. It gets downgraded to a social worker 1 position because it's less money. Now, everybody's coming in at a social worker 1, social worker 2, but they're doing very complicated work, high-stress work. When I was chief administrator, I was a very strong advocate for maintaining the positions because it is really not an equitable process to have a social worker 1 from CPS handle crisis situations. You're going in, GPD is calling you, you're going into an incident situation, your safety is also at risk, Second, when there is a crunch, when we had, during my period, CPS is the only staff that would have actually the premium pays, night differential, overtime, on-call pay. Again, when there's a budget crunch, that is taken away. And so even if I'm saying there should be exceptions, there's exceptions made for public safety, we say CPS is part of that public safety group, but they are not necessarily considered because it is a money issue. And so, and then during Senator Forbes' time, when he was speaker, there was a law that was passed that actually changed the structure for foster care payments. And it also, in that law, required that the foster payments be reviewed and adjusted annually. Again, it becomes a money issue because if the departments are given a directive that this is your cap, then the 5 divisions in the department are going to have to fight for that general fund allocation. So I love my position now because I can say what the government employees cannot say, but I'm saying it because even if we're talking about all this, the bottom line is CPS is equal to fire, it's equal to police, it's equal to the EMTs. And then even when the crisis situation has been stabilized, they are still handling an unstable child and an unstable family. And depending on the number of barriers that those families are experiencing, substance use, domestic violence, multiple children, homelessness, all of these issues are what a social worker 1 has to deal with. Even a social worker 3 position, this is a complicated household. And we used to give only the most seasoned workers all of these complicated cases. But the reality today is that we don't have seasoned workers. We have graduates that are coming in, having to fill vacancies, even as an LTA, and they are going into the front lines unprepared. And then secondly, even after we've stabilized the situation, every resource that's available to the social workers for placement, foster families, all of that is maxed out. What are they going to do? I mean, I'm going to have another testimony, but because I know it's like, I don't know what to do. Some of the social workers have said, I don't know what to do. Because if a foster family is saying, I'm having problems with the children, their behaviors are beyond what I can handle, there's no place to put that child because Ali's full, even Gumana Asi's full, and they can't find any other foster family that might even take in an additional foster child. So I'd like for everybody to understand and place it in the context that while there is so much negativity bombarded upon CPS, we're not doing the right thing. We're not looking at what is it that we can do, because the bottom line is Guam is not a healthy community. We're not healthy physically and we're not healthy mentally. And this is what this is what they're facing. And so, when we don't know what to do with the parents, and then we don't know what to do with the children, and then we're going to try and, for lack of very graphic terminology, we're going to stick them there until we find someplace else that's probably more appropriate. I mean, it's really just how can we do what is overly demanded of the staff? And we're not doing anything to help alleviate them, even with the hiring. And Mr. San Agustin is correct. People don't want to go to CPS because the high-stress environment physically affects people, And some of them, after that, don't want to do social work. They want to go and be a sales associate at Louis Vuitton. That's the difference, So it's not enough to say we're going to have, because we've had sanity days with our social workers where we're working a case. I would have staff before 24 hours on a shift because they're waiting at GMH for mom to give birth, because we're going to give the doctor the PINS notice to remove the child from that mom's custody. And so, and then she gives birth to an ICE baby, and then we have to find where we're going to put that child who's undergoing withdrawals. I can't think. Where are we going to put them where the family's going to understand what this child is going through? That's the reality. And, myself, I can say, yes, we're going to bitch about it, but the bitching about it is also how we vent the stress. And then after that, we kind of put on our crowns and we go and look for an interim solution, because right now, those solutions, even the interim solutions, there's none. There's none. And we really, sometimes I think they think I'm really against them, but I'm trying to advocate on behalf of CPS social workers, but not only CPS social workers, even public health social workers, because they are going into very nasty environments. They're going into places where we think is third world, that happens in third world, but that third world is here on Guam. And those workers over on the public health side probably don't even get hazard pay. I don't think so, right? So please consider that, and yes, maybe Arthur and Terry need to be a little bit more aggressive in their advocacy about our employees, because, and yes, sometimes it gets us in trouble, but I think if you're going to say you're a social worker, advocacy is part of that job. And you never, I'm retired, yes, but I never give up being an advocate for what I believe in, and I think that needs to be said. And so even if we have all of these timelines, even if we're going to say we're going to hire a social worker, social workers are hearing about what's happening at CPS. And they're thinking, I don't think I want to go into the fire. When I was at public health, I left senior citizens to go to child welfare, and people were telling me, why are you leaving heaven to go to hell? Usually people leave hell to go to heaven, but it was the other way around. That's really the nature of the work. And it takes a special person to really be fully committed. I was lucky. I had social workers who stayed a social worker for their career, for the entirety of their government career. And they stayed at CPS. Sometimes they left CPS in order to be promoted to a 3, and then they would try to come back. That was how committed they were. But we also had a team. We had social workers, we had homemakers, we had coordinators, because the coordinators are also the ones that manage all the other peripheral activities, not just the placement, but they're also supporting the social workers. And if we're talking about all of these monies, yeah, maybe we have CARES monies and we have rescue monies, but when those monies go away, and it's just based on what is Gov Guam's revenues supplemented with the federal monies, then, you know, I always say, you legislators, if you say, well, you know, the priorities are for public safety and the children of Guam and all that, then really I would call you out on it, because what you pledge when you're campaigning is really not being demonstrated when it comes to the priorities of having to put where those are. And honestly, yes, they're constrained because they're saying this is what you get and you live with it and you allocate it. And then you figure out how you're going to make things work. But it does not remove the mandate that is given to the department and any other department that's doing regulatory work. So we can do social services, but the other part of it is public health is also a regulatory department. And in that regulatory function, there also needs to be some kind of consideration, because these workers have the power to break up families. And they also have the power to reunite them, because they're the link to the judge. And so, you know, you have that power, but they're getting paid social worker 3. So the way I see it, it's like you're in the military. Doesn't matter whether you're E1 or E5 or you know, you all get the same pay, regardless of what work you do, right? Right, Senator? So, social worker 3, whether you're CPS, public health, DOE, they all get the same pay. But the nature of the work is different. And that variation, there's no premium pay attached to that. And if it is, then maybe it is on the 4th year going into a campaign. And then after that, it's not. It's taken away. And so, you know, so thank you for listening to me. And I hope at least that it does give you an insight into the work they do.
I really appreciate that, Ms. Calvo, especially based on your experience as chief at CPS and your current that you never gave up. You continue to work for Catholic Social Service, to lead Catholic Social Services and providing very similar services, the shelters for when we can't find placements for the children and the women and everyone, the homeless. I really appreciate your statements here today. I'd like to clarify, if I could just, especially since she just talked about this premium pay. I thought we just confirmed that we have premium pay, you have hazardous pay, overtime, the 22% increase, you've got the incentive pay, is that the same as premium pay, right? 25% incentive pay.
25%.
10% hazardous pay. 22% increase. And we're talking about asking for more, the training certification pay incentive, asking for the social work licensing pay incentives.
Right.
Okay, can you just tell me again, I asked you, are these, the ones that already you have, subject to removal?
Well, as Senator Sonagzine indicated, for example, hazardous pay has already been approved by labor, so it is something that we have to pay. Overtime is based on an overtime plan, and the incentive is the incentive specific right now to the Bureau of Social Service Administration social workers who are performing the work with our clients and their families. And so it is our position that those pays, incentives, hazardous, overtime, is something that will continue.
Because that was the mandate in the executive order, was for DOA to go and study the pay of the
Right.
social workers, particularly at CPS. And I agree with you that they are like law enforcement, so that, and in a very special class of the social workers compared to other agencies as well. And that's exactly what the executive order mandated them to do. So you're testifying that that is done.
Yes, those pays are
Okay.
incentives and are already in place. And
Okay.
it's actually a study that was done or documentation provided by DOA on the policy for
right.
the implementation of the 25% pay.
Have you had this experience where people who should be in social worker 3 positions are not able to be in that position? They're still stuck in social worker 1 positions,
Well,
or
actually, the
vice
Department of
versa?
Administration allows flexibility to the agency. And so you can take a social worker 1 position, and some of you have been agency directors know this. You can upgrade a position, you can also downgrade a position.
Okay.
So you can take a 3, and if you have a potential 2, and you're saying, hey, there might be a need for a 2 in this other
All right.
section.
Let's
you
talk
can-
about your needs then. So
Okay.
you testified today, you've got 2 open social worker 3s,
Correct.
and that,
And so with that, Speaker, there
You-
were a list of 10, and we had 6 positions, but because of those that declined for various reasons, we ended up with 4 applicants that we interviewed, and the 4
you
applicants.
said you selected the 4,
Yes, the 4
but there are
applicants were.
2 open positions.
Correct, because there's a total of 6 funded positions that were being recruited.
Okay, so there were supposed to be 6, you filled 4.
Correct.
There's still 2 open.
Correct.
Okay. And then the social worker 2, there were 7 open, all 7 are still open. Social
They're-
worker 2. Social worker 1's, 4 open, still being recruited. So just clarify for me again, money is not the issue. So we're lucky these days, money's not the issue, and in fact, the legislature's tried to give more money directly to CPS in its budget by line iteming that in its budgets as long as I've been here. But money's not the issue. We've got the open positions. Are these enough open positions? Have you opened enough positions?
Well, the situation we have, Speaker, is really, even if we funded 3 more SW3s right now, we don't have a list. They've exhausted the list, so they have to go through the recruitment and announcement
I
process
know,
again.
they're not
Right.
recruited, right? So, but have you determined your need correctly?
Well, they have a standard, I don't know, do you have that with us this afternoon? I'm not sure if they brought that.
Because, all right, so that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 more social workers that you need immediately.
I think that there were 7, 4, and 2, so that's what, 11, 12, 13?
13, okay, fine.
I
I just want to
realize
make sure, so because you're telling us with all the cases that you need 13 more, you've got positions open for 13 more, you've got funding for 13 more, and we're trying to fill this pipeline with the 13, we're trying to incentivize it in any other way. But really the bottom line is, and then just back to your staffing pattern, you say, I see you have 27 current social workers, right?
We have 24, 3 SSS1s will make it 27, and 1 SSS2 will make it 28. And that's one of the things I wanted to
Okay, so 28
clarify
social
on the
workers.
record.
Yeah, you've got, and then you've got other positions.
Right.
And so when we're talking, the whole reason we're here is because first we wanted to find out, are we properly vetting, right? Foster placements, and I see the efforts that you made. These has to become permanent. They have to be consistent, and I think we just have a little bit misunderstanding today. You've shown us the new things that you've been provided by GPD. You've confirmed GPD, and you've confirmed the court. But prior to that, you had already confirmed that you're doing the internet searches, that you've revamped with the assistance of the AG, your application forms, and your vetting, and that you've changed your process, you're vetting everyone in the home, right? And excellent suggestion to make it a burden on them, that if any changes, they must report, and then you must vet those as well. You've also changed your process so that you're telling me today that you're changing from your current rules of quarterly checks on the homes to monthly. That's what you're saying today. All right, so that should help, all right? And of course, these incidences are happening, they're crimes, right? They're not something we're predicting, and with all your checks, hopefully you're going to be able to weed some out, but we won't be able to weed them all, unfortunately. But so the checks will help, and the other like backup that you've put in there of, you know, services that can be provided, but the checks, I just want to see. So that's why, to me, if you're going to do monthly checks, you're able to do that with your current number of employees?
So Senator, yes, we are going to commit to that monthly visit. We do have, again, like I said earlier, about the HEP section, monitoring and visiting the licensed fosters. And then we also have our CPS, like our case management and investigation units that actually do go out, and they will commit to that 1 month check-in for the kids that they monitor.
Are there other positions that you could use to do some of this work?
Yes, we do have our homemakers who also go into the home to visit. So
Right.
we have 7 currently.
Do you have openings for that?
Not for homemakers, ma'am.
Would that help? I mean, Art,
Definitely,
can you
that will
open
help
those
our-
up and bring people in? If we can't get the social workers in, you have to do something. I know that you're professing that you're going to get these monthly visits done. The people in the back are shaking their heads like they're already overwhelmed, and I believe that. So please, you have to look at all the other, like you described, the other homemakers and other positions. She described an associate position that is helping in their case. I think that's an excellent idea. Associate degree in family services, this is for caseworkers, right? So caseworkers, homemakers, to alleviate the burden of the social workers if they're the only ones that you're going to send out for particular cases or whatever. And you need to really focus on that and establish that, because any other gaps, and you know, I don't think our community, let alone our senators, are going to be able to live with that. And so let us know, right? We want to help you, and I feel like everybody is doing their very best, and we just really do. But like you said, if money's the issue, Director, I very much expect you during your budget to advocate for money to be allocated here as a priority. I expect that. And I expect that right now we give you these lump sum budgets, and if their money was an issue, that it should be funneled here to create these positions, to fill these positions. And we're going to have our talk with DOA, but I can't do it without you. I've talked to DOA, I've talked to the Lieutenant Governor, and I've talked to you. And all of you have told me that, yes, social workers are the priority, and yet we're being told that the processing time is too long. So I've suggested that they bring in a team, like a task force from all other autonomous and other agencies that can do HR for now and address these HR backlogs. And yeah, but your testimony is very telling. You're saying we've got a list, they don't even want to interview, and we can't even make a list that you've had these positions open. So unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that's a problem we're facing with other positions, like teachers and very critical positions. Okay, so we have enough openings, we have enough funding, we still can't hire the social workers. We have enough students graduating. We need to hook them in, as you've proposed, and we need DOA to do its part to get them in quickly. Our licensing is okay. They can get in. They can get into the jobs. They can get into CPS, right? So the licensing's not holding them back. You're going to have to help them when the new rules come up, that all of your team is going to be able to meet the new rules or do what they need. Okay, so then, and we're going to get monthly visits, and you're going to have to find a way to do that. I say if you need this to be an emergency, that you need to advocate that to the governor again and have her declare it again an emergency and get a bigger team if you need. You have to do that. So, and you've testified in reaction or in response to Senator Brown's question, that as far as you know, there are no delayed stipends to foster families, foster parents. They're getting what they're supposed to get on the time that they're supposed to get it. The delays might be the court issuing the orders. So we're placing them, waiting for court orders. And can you just take a look at that? But you're aware of every court placement, right? Even without the order?
Yes, we do see that
Okay.
all court orders coming in.
So maybe you can give me a report of how many you think that affects, if there are. We've already overwhelmed our foster parents. We've got to do what we can, so you've got to give us your best recommendations of how to help them, right? And we've tried to find more, we've tried to help them. Let's just continue to do that. Have you reviewed the stipends annually?
No, I have not. The program has not. But with regards to the foster parents, as if we are having this discussion this evening, I do have the notes similar to what you're saying, speakers. We're going to put out the roster concept, put a list together of everybody that's authorized, and just double check to make sure that every foster parent listed that's due a stipend actually has been recently paid.
Okay.
And maybe, just maybe, we'll find that case that Senator Brown had mentioned.
Yeah,
And if not, Senator, if, I'm open to you texting me and with your permission that we
okay,
can
so
look
we'll
at
take care of that
specific to
one. We're
case.
hoping it's
I
not
hope
a
you do, and I
systemic
will find
problem,
out,
though,
because
right?
that foster parent was messaging me here this evening watching this hearing.
Okay.
And they said they have a court order, so.
So we're going to send that one to you. Take care of it. But
We will.
we don't want this to be a systemic problem that's not being disclosed tonight, right? So you're saying there's no issue with the money funding the foster parents. There's
Not-
no issue with your admin personnel actually doing that.
Madam Speaker,
Yes.
if I may, staying on that same track, when's the last time those stipends have been adjusted to the cost of inflation, cost of living? When's the last time?
The last adjustment was in 2015.
2015?
Okay, so Director, you're promising to readjust those?
We're going to look at what the impact would be, Speaker, and then we can present that because you're talking 16,
Well,
17, 18,
not the
20,
effect,
22.
but your recommendation as to how they should be adjusted, and then it's up to BBMR and our appropriations chair to,
Yeah, and so that's like 8 years of, we'll do the 5% annual increase, and we can lay that out and see what that amount is going to be.
where'd you get 5%?
That's actually what the annual increment is based on, you have that
I thought the statute says you're supposed to analyze it every year, no? Is it automatic 5%? Then there's nothing to do, we're done. Which is it? Okay, please clarify that. And so the government of Guam has done many things trying to get social workers' pay increased. I'm glad to hear that it has. We're trying to get more, and I'm so glad to hear that that's being effective, that we are getting graduates. We have made sure that the scholarships at UOG that are supposed to go towards social workers are going there. Same thing with the nurses. So we've reprioritized that. If they're not covered under ProTech and you find that there's a need, my understanding of the process is when the ProTech, they have a hearing on ProTech every year and you have to go in and advocate that we have a need. And so, Director, I'm looking to you that if you need graduate level social workers like masters and doctorates, that you're going to have to advocate with ProTech that there's a need for that. Right? Otherwise, they go with, I think, testimony on that. Does anyone else here have any other idea of how to better monitor the homes besides what we're doing now? The foster placements?
Well, if I may, Speaker, I know this is like we were focusing on retention, recruitment, and pay
Yes,
plan.
because we thought that
Yeah.
we were short of I thought we were short of social workers, and that's why we were not able to, check on these children more often, check on the home placements more often. I thought we were very short of social workers, and that was the issue. And yes, so that's why we're talking about pay and retention and everything. Mhm.
So we had also internally been discussing in the last discussion we had on the oversight of the 18th, there was conversation about just looking at what the current mandate is and how and what we can look at for assistance. So Going over to Ms. LePay's comment about background checks, one of the things that we're looking at, and we want to say this, that we are asking if through your office, you could provide us perhaps a roundtable conversation so that we can look at existing legislation, but also look at what we can do to improve and strengthen the legislation. So one of the areas we were looking at was to do a mandate for background checks for all adults, and similar to what Ms. LePage mentioned earlier, for all adults working with children, including volunteers, childcare facilities owners, operators, and employees. And so that you would not just extend this to those applying for placement, but you would actually do it for anyone who supervises children, including our volunteers. And so these are things we're looking at, but we are really looking to, as Senator Brown had talked about, just, we really want to get into some of this, more of the details. We're looking to a roundtable where you could help us also develop policy, and we can put before for conversation what other states are doing with regards to background checks. Our mandate does provide for some basis for disqualifying applicants, but there are other provisions, other crimes that we can consider. And so we also have that review that we've been working at. Let me just...
Don't you have full discretion? Are you talking about foster placements?
Well, actually, there's regulations, and it tells you I think it's section 4, but it tells you, just a second. You have it? That's okay. It tells you what some of the crimes are, and they're listed there, but not all the crimes are listed there.
Okay. So would you have discretion if there were other crimes not listed to deny placement? You told me before, yes.
That we have discretion we only have discretion, we can deny placement, but we're in our understanding bound by the statute of the rules and regs, which was put into law.
Mr. Uggan, I think it was you. You told me before that if you look at these internet checks, those are not official, but you could deny placement based on that. You told me if you looked at these other former arrests, those are not convictions that you could deny based on that. Those are not crimes, like the list that the director's talking about. Do you have the discretion to deny a foster placement or licensing of a foster family? Is it your discretion?
If we have...
Yes, right? So you can use your criteria as you determine, your agency, correct?
Right.
You don't need a new law.
No, what we wanted to do was expand to list the different types of offenses so that also the applicants are very clear in terms of what crimes, we could expand the list of crimes so applicants would know even beforehand, and the processors would also know beforehand that if someone has committed any of these crimes that they would not be able to pursue placement.
I think you've worked with the Attorney General already with a new application.
Mm-hmm.
Just include whatever you want on that application. Put the whole list of crimes that you want to use as your criteria. I don't think you need us to do that. Put that down as criteria. At least you need them to disclose. And then you, as a team, you have to have your own guidelines, right? As to what are you going to do with all this information you're getting? You're getting a lot of information now. What are you going to do with it? Are you just going to say any infraction, they're out? Then we're going to be coming back here with all kinds of different treatment, right? So you're going to, with all the new information that you are requiring of these applicants and that you are getting access to, you're going to also have to make your guidelines as to what are you going to do with it, right? If it's an arrest, does that disqualify them? Arrest for these crimes versus those crimes? I really think you can do all that.
Okay.
I will help you. I will write it tomorrow if you think it needs to be law. But I can't see why. You've had all the discretion all this time, right? To deny. Okay. All right. And so, again, some excellent suggestions tonight. Thank you so much for putting in the time to think about it and to share with us and go all out on it. So I'm glad that we're going to address these foster claims that they're not getting paid. Please don't let that ever be an issue. We have really tried over the years to make sure that the insurance coverage is working, the stipends are working. So, Director, please readjust those before the budget, okay? And I know your budget's coming up this month. All right. the mental wellness programs mandating reporting now that's a law that way we can pass, right? But I'm not sure who we're going to mandate at this point. Is it who, the foster parents?
I was referring to those who kind of what I think Director San Augustine and I are on the same page with that. Anyone who in the course of their employment comes in contact with children are covered by are considered mandated reporters. So these people should be required to do an FBI background check in the same way that our foster parents are, because that would be proactive.
Okay, so who are you worried is not being screened that's an employee?
Well, not so much just employees, Speaker, but also volunteers into programs.
Volunteers.
So like, let's say you have a volunteer at a child care center or some other organization in which they provide supervision over a child or children.
All right, now, are you allowed to require an FBI background check for anyone? Can we control FBI background checks?
Well, for Head Start, because I can speak for my agency,
thanks.
we have our federal performance standards that require every 3 years our staff receive updated police, court, and clearances and FBI background checks.
Okay.
So we're doing that. So I'm saying, why not extend that to the other people who are covered under that mandated reporter clause, wherever possible, to be proactive.
Okay, got it. Okay, thanks, got it. Yes, Diana?
And I wanted to add, as a Catholic organization, and given the situation on Guam, we as an administrative unit also are required by Catholic order that anyone who does work not only with children but with vulnerable populations, they are required to go through what they call a virtuous program, and there is a background check associated with that is coordinated through the Chancery. So all of our staff, not only those that work with children, but everyone, because of the vulnerable populations that we serve, everybody is required to go through that background check as part of the Archdiocese requirement.
Okay, would you, if you don't mind, I hate to put more work on you, but send that to me so I can know exactly the virtuos and yours, what your rule is for Head Start federal programs, and maybe if you have one that you want, Director, let me know, and I will do that. Okay, what about, just one more thing. Oh, when you worked with the Attorney General, you also worked with DYA, you got all those people to assure you that they're gonna check backgrounds as well. And I asked you earlier, what about the expunged records? Do we have an answer on that, or not yet? Expunged records show to law enforcement. So if they open it up, they're gonna know. But I'm just not seeing the promise to inform you of it, right? Yes, Director? Or
So,
Deputy?
Senator, the response that we actually received from the Guam Police Department, Chief Ignacio.
They said no.
They said no, that's
I know.
correct. And so we've not been able to move forward on expunged cases.
That's from the GPD, but you were supposed to follow up with the courts, and also you had access through DYA, I don't know, check, and then the Attorney General, right? So just double check that, please.
So I'm sorry, on Ms. Rossetti's response, it did not include the details about expunge. So I did write to her, but I will confirm that with you.
Yes, please.
Yes.
That's what we missed in the last case, and so if we, after all of these additional clearances, are still not going to get to that, we're kind of going to be in the same situation. Okay, and then, yes. I know, we all do, so I do intend, we're ending. Why did you? Okay. Do you want to make sure, Senator Brown, that all your questions are answered here with these people that have also spent their time being here and trying to answer your questions? I asked again earlier, is there any other idea of how to more often check on the children or the families? And if there is any, please send it to me. Okay, so right now we're counting that we're just going to make sure we have enough social workers to go out and do these home checks. But if there is any other system that anyone wants to suggest, please let me know. Ms. Calvo.
So there actually is an avenue, but it does require some kind of management or administrative address with regards to the issue of confidentiality. Normally, when you have a family that requires multi-agency involvement, there usually is a multidisciplinary team approach to try and coordinate the care plan or the service plan for that family. And in that, there would be various parties that are involved in the team, comprised of people from public health department, DOE through early intervention or SPED, maybe Guam Behavioral Health through their IFA Magunta programs, and even DYA or the courts through some child who are serving children and as well as serving children, sibling groups across the board. And because this was a discussion that we've also had with the Guam Early Learning Council, because it's really the same people. It's the same people. And so we have been trying to look at it from a broader perspective that if you already have a team approach, then in some form of numbers, you can actually spread the work out. So that if this month is the month for monitoring, or every month is monitoring, but early intervention may have their own appointment scheduling, there might be also a mental health contact. I mean, these families are gonna have a lot of appointments. And so even just doing wellness checks, GPD can do wellness checks. It might be a lot to ask for them, but we have people who will go and just do wellness checks if we've not heard or seen anyone. CSS does wellness checks on our families. The challenge is that it is a coordination issue across departments. You may have the same challenges within those departments about staffing issues, time constraints, but if we already have a team working together for this family, then it's really part of the care plan also to coordinate how we can be the eyes for these children when we are interacting with them. The part where it gets a little bit administratively challenged is on the issue of confidentiality. CPS basically would have the highest level of confidentiality, but that makes up the mix. Then, there still needs to be a reorientation because we also want to maintain the integrity of the, and safeguard the confidentiality of the work that is being done between the respective partners. But it could be doable, almost like a wraparound approach.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I guess teachers would be, or counselors in the schools would also be instrumental.
Right, that's correct. And in talking with systems of care,
Yes.
You are talking about a wraparound approach. You're talking about multiple agencies involved with one family. And although it may not necessarily be a protective services worker doing that home visit that month, but you might have somebody who's a visiting nurse, a project visita, or you might have a pregnant mom in the house who will have somebody come out regarding the prenatal care and development of that child. Or there might be that newborn to 3 where Guam Early Intervention Systems comes out to the home. And you'll be able to share in those ideas. It depends on the level of confidentiality, also depends on the comfort level of the person doing the home visit and whether they're willing to sort of extract that information. But if you can work through that system, then perhaps in some ways they can be an extension of the eyes and the ears that BOSA has, and that would be a win-win situation.
Appreciate that idea. And I know that you've worked that type of situation in other programs, so I appreciate that. All right, again, thank you everyone for your dedication and the lives that you have chosen, and that you've really graced all of our children and all of us, really, our whole entire community. Situs Masi. I don't want to keep you any longer, but I really do want to express my sincere thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to This oversight hearing is hereby adjourned. It's I can't even read anymore. What time is it? 7:30 p.m. Si Diyos mahal si todos. Thank you very much.